Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patty Daylight, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What We Made Possible. Today's episode is going to be similar to what we talked about last time, which is around transitioning out of your organization, leaving well. I just had a coaching session today with a client who said that the Leaving Well series feels like it is specifically tailored for her. And so if you're not in my emails and getting that series, then get on there. And also, we're going to talk about that more today, more things that we're going to flesh it out a little bit more. And we're going to talk about one of the things that I explored via email, which is that burnout accelerates transitions. And burnout makes the decision for you sometimes. Sometimes you don't choose to leave. And if we want to leave well, then we need to do something about burnout, right? So on the personal side, I shared a little bit of a personal check-in last time, so I can share another one today, which is around the new dog. He's getting a little bit better. We learned a lot about adopting a dog. It's been 2 weeks now that he's been with us, and we learned that there are a bunch of different milestones. So the first 3 days is when he kind of decompresses. First 3 weeks is when he starts to understand the rhythm and the patterns of the days, of our days and our day-to-day. And in 3 months is generally how long it takes an adopted dog to feel comfortable in your home. So that kind of gave me permission to adjust my expectations when it came to this dog who we adopted. Even though we didn't get him from a shelter, we adopted him from a new family. But, it's a whole completely different experience for him. Yeah, so I'm noticing my own energy and my own kind of capacity and how it's shifting because we have this new life in our home who has a completely different kind of circadian rhythm than the rest of us that we've established. And what does that mean? Having to pay attention to him every second that he's out of the crate and not letting up on that. It's a really big toll on my own capacity right now and my own energy. I wouldn't say that I'm burnt out necessarily, but it's definitely something that I'm noticing. And, we'll talk about it more today. What that means when you notice that your energy and your capacity are not where you want them to be or where you need them to be. And honestly, in this political moment, it makes sense that we are exhausted, right? A client who's currently planning to leave their org in a year or two, another just became ED but knows that she only plans to be in it for 3, maybe 5 years. Others who just know, like they come into the job, sometimes coming out of retirement to become an executive director, and they say, hey, I'm not going to be here forever, right? And they're exhausted, right? For good reason. Funding is not secure right now. The current federal administration, the Trump administration, is targeting the work of a lot of the groups that I work with. The future of their orgs and their teams, their communities who they do this for, all of that is really at stake, right? Especially folks who work within marginalized communities, those who work with immigrants, those who work in climate work. Like basically, if you're doing any kind of progressive social change in the world, then you are exhausted right now. And so what does that look like? What does burnout look like in the context of transitions specifically, right? So when I think about burnout, one image comes to mind, which is battery saver mode. It's really when you go on low battery, right? Like, You know that moment when your phone is about to die and you don't have a charger and you don't know when the next time you'll get to charge it, right? You put it on battery saver mode. Everything starts to slow down. You stop opening new apps. You only do the essentials, right? You conserve energy because survival is the priority, right? Like you need to get home with your phone still on because what if something happens, right? So that's exactly what happens when we're burnt out. That's what happens in our bodies. Our nervous system says, I don't feel safe, so let's conserve. So, what does that mean? What does conservation mean in our nervous systems and in our bodies? We go back to old patterns. Those old patterns resurface not because they're helpful, but because they're familiar, right? The familiarity and the patterning, it gets us stuck, right? Instead of moving forward in transition, we get stuck in survival mode. And really, it's maybe in survival mode that we're like, oh, shit, I gotta leave. Like, we get in like that flight mode and there's no way that we can continue on in our work. So I just shared this resource with one of my clients today, and I've shared it in a lot of the groups that I kind of come and coach with, and it's the book called Burnout by the Nagoski sisters, Emily and Amelia Nagoski, doctors both. I want to say that they earned those doctorates. So yeah, they make a point that connects here, right? There's a difference between the stressor, the thing that is causing you stress, and then there's the stress response. So the stressor might be the structural gap. It might be the team dynamic. It might be the lack of funding. It might be just like the sheer weight of leadership, right? Your body is responding to those stressors, right? The things that are making you stressed. But if those stressors went away, the stress response still needs to happen, right? It's still, you need to complete what the authors call the stress cycle. That means releasing that activation in your body through movement, through breath, play, rest, connection, a hug, a really long hug, crying, laughter, right? All of these things. So otherwise you end up in low battery mode, this battery saver mode. Technically you're still on, but you're not really able to do what you're meant to do. So when burnout forces the transition, right? Your body makes the decision for you. You literally cannot go on anymore. It's because you've been on low battery mode for too long without a real recharge. And so the invitation that I'm offering in this episode is to notice that earlier, to complete the stress cycle. And I'll talk more about this. And to build practices that really give your body permission to come back online, right? To come back to full battery as much as is possible in this moment, right? That's what lets us leave well. That's what lets us leave intact. We're not like just collapsing out, but we're able to kind of bring care into the transition. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about like what are the 3 hallmarks of burnout? What does it look like when you have burnout, right? There's 3 kind of elements from the authors. One is emotional exhaustion. You're tired and there's fatigue from caring for too many things and too much for too long. It's actually difficult to feel empathy in those moments because literally your emotional stores are low. It takes energy. It takes actual emotional and neurological energy to be empathic. And so a leader shared with me that it's difficult for them when they are not resourced to come into a team meeting, let's say, and feel empathy for the folks who are with them. And they want to so bad. And they understand that, the other people's lives are as full as theirs, but it's actually difficult to feel it. So that's emotional exhaustion. The second is a decreased sense of accomplishment. Like you feel like nothing you do makes a difference. So there's this kind of sense of futility, there's a frustration, there's a what's the point of it all? And the wins almost don't matter, or they feel inaccessible, right? Like they don't feel like you can accomplish a thing, and if you do accomplish it, it's like whatever, like it doesn't actually make a difference, which is really hard for people who work trying to make a difference in other people's lives, right? Like that reminds me of a story that we used to tell when I did a year with AmeriCorps and with City Year. I worked in a school full time. And one of the stories they told was around all these starfish that were coming up on shore. And a child was on the shore and throwing the starfish one by one back into the ocean. And all the other people on the beach were like, well, what are you doing? Like, it's not like you can help any of these, like all of these starfish. And the kid said, well, I can help this starfish, right? So that sense of accomplishment, that sense of like, yeah, this problem is really, really big, but I can make a difference here. That goes away when you are burnt out. It doesn't feel like what you're doing is actually making a difference. So it's really about how you feel about the thing and not whether you are actually making a difference. Okay, so that's a second hallmark of burnout. The third is depersonalization, which is really just not feeling like yourself. I can share that there was a moment where I was making decisions that did not align and just like didn't feel like me. And you kind of just like make brash decisions, or your judgment is clouded and you don't enjoy the things that you used to enjoy, right? There's like, you just don't feel like you. So there's that sense of depersonalization. So in a transition, right? How does this look? So let's talk about if a leader wants to leave on their own terms, right? They already plan to leave, but then their bodies shut down first. So that has happened, right? I've seen in my work throughout the years, not necessarily folks that I've coached, but I've seen colleagues just kind of ignore the warning signs until their health gives out, right? Literal, actual medical conditions forced them to stop. And so what could have been thoughtful, supported transitions actually turned into emergency exits. And I do not want that for you. An emergency exit is the last thing you want if you are trying to have a sustainable mission. So when there's an emergency exit, right, there's that person who is then stuck with having to deal with the health stuff, right? We saw this a lot in the pandemic. And then there's the team, right? On the other side of that, there's the team that's left reeling when a departure suddenly happens, right? Because the person couldn't go on. So what happens, right? You're caught off guard. Then there's confusion about priorities. There's frustration at the lack of closure, and often resentment that builds, right? Because no one had time to prepare or process. And we don't want that for you either, right? Like we don't want urgency. And what burnout does is it introduces this urgency into the process, which needs to be spacious, right? Transitions need to be spacious. The other kind of way that this looks in a transition is staff who stay loyal through crisis, right? Until there's nothing left to give. So this happened to me in 2021. I did have a bout of burnout. It lasted definitely past 2021 through maybe the early 2023. But when it started, it was about a year into the pandemic, right? Violence against Asian Americans became really prevalent. I worked in a DEI office at the time, and I was in a team meeting and I had a breakdown. I had to mute myself. I had to go off camera. And eventually I had to step away for about a month. I remember trying to access FMLA, which is a type of leave, medical leave, so that I could, use more than, 2 weeks of vacation. And it just never worked out. I was so frustrated, and that I was using vacation days. I wasn't leaving my role. So this is not a transition example, but I did had to hand off a project midstream, and I could barely function enough to do it. I remember we had one meeting and I was like, honestly, I can't even tell you what I was doing. I don't know. And they just had to figure it out. And that really sucked. Like I still feel guilty about it. I still feel bad that the person who had to pick up that project didn't have exactly what they needed. I shared on the last episode, we had this culture of like, what if somebody wins the lottery, right? Like, and so we had this culture where everybody kind of knew what was happening for others and they could pick up. And so they were able to do it, but I could barely function in the handoff of like the details and getting into the weeds of telling this person exactly what was the next step because he knew kind of big picture. So yeah, that's what it looks like. So let's talk about why this happens, right? Why does burnout hit so hard, especially in leadership transitions? A lot of it has to do with the kind of work that many of us are in, right? Social impact organizations, nonprofits are operating in a climate of scarce funding, constant crises, relentless demands for more output, right? The communities that we serve need us even more, and then we have fewer resources. So leaders and staff are asked to hold the work itself and the weight of the injustice and the urgency of change. All of these things, right? The Nagoski sisters, the authors, describe something called the human giver syndrome in their book Burnout. It's this idea that some of us we operate in the world mainly to give, to offer time, care, energy, labor. And they talk about how the folks who are socialized to be givers, right, human givers, are really like folks with marginalized identities, women, BIPOC leaders, anyone already kind of carrying systemic inequities. I forget what the other side of the coin is called. It's like just human being, I think, like human receiver. And that's white men. So there's that. They're not socialized to just give and give and give. They're socialized to just be and be a full human and to receive, right? And to get grace, even if you are a really hateful person. So, yeah. So the Nagoski's name this human giver kind of role that we are socialized into. And when we are who we are socialized in this way, we tend to have more burnout, right? They also name this difference between the stressors and the stress response. I think I named this earlier. So stressors are the external pressure, the underfunded team, the coalition conflict, the hostile political climate. So even when those stressors ease, the body is still holding the stress response. The nervous system is still activated. So shifting a workload or handing off a project doesn't always bring relief, right? I mentioned I could barely function when I handed off the project and took time off. The body needs a way to release what it's been carrying. So for me, what that looked like was I ran away to visit a friend in Mexico. I spent time in nature. I spent time not on the computer. I cried. I laughed, all of these things. So I kind of moved through the stress cycle in the way that I needed to at the time. They use this metaphor that emotions are like tunnels, right? When you move through them fully, you come out the other side and you're into light. But when you don't finish a stress cycle, you end up living inside the tunnel in that kind of darkness. That sense of stuckness is really what leaders tend to feel when they're burnt out. The fatigue, the not feeling like yourself, the belief that nothing is making a difference, that's that feeling of like living in the tunnel, not being able to see the light. And there's like layer this on top of existing kind of structural challenges, right? Too few staff, too many priorities, unacknowledged tension. That means that the work is already stretched thin, right? So when burnout enters the picture, it compounds those cracks and it makes them harder to ignore. All of this is to say that transitions that are forced by burnout come at a really high cost, right? The leader feels depleted. They're unable to exit on their own term. The team is left without clarity, without stability. The mission risks losing momentum, risks losing community trust when energy is needed the most. So paying attention to burnout is not just about individual well-being. It's not about that. It's important. Individual well-being is super important. And when we're thinking about, okay, what's the impact of burnout on my mission? It's impacting the health of your folks' ability to carry the work forward, right? For you, some reflection prompts for you. So first, where are you already feeling early signs of burnout? In what ways are you already stuck in that stress cycle, stuck living in that tunnel? In what ways do you feel emotionally fatigued? In what ways do you not feel like yourself? In what ways do you feel a little bit of that futility, right? And then what would it look like to notice and respond before your body makes the decision for you? So what are some of the things that help you to relieve that stress? For some, it's different for folks, right? I mentioned laughter, crying, time with other humans, right? Not just self-regulation, but co-regulation. Physical activity, just a walk, right? A lie down, putting your legs up the wall. Matter of fact, if you're in a position to stop what you're doing, I'm going to invite you into a practice. So this is called Stop the World. And this is a way to down-regulate the nervous system. It's a way to, when you're in fight, flight, maybe even freeze, shut down, this is a way to come back to center. So the way that it works is that we're going to relax our eyes. And I'll walk you through it, but I'll tell you why this works first. And I learned this from Dr. Melissa Tiers, who is a hypnotherapist, and she teaches doctors, therapists, coaches how to work with the unconscious mind. And she is one of the foremost leaders in hypnosis, which is really just about working with the unconscious mind. And that means working with the body, right? So really somatic practices. This is part of her anti-anxiety toolkit that I learned in a training with her. So this is called Stop the World. It relaxes the eyes because when we're in fight or flight, imagine that you're kind of like running from a tiger. You need your eyes to be really focused, right? Like you need to be able to jump over that tree stump and turn that corner really quickly and find your way, right? And so your eyes need to be focused. But so now contrast that with a person who is just kind of lying down and watching the clouds, right? Or a person who is able to stop and smell the roses, or who notices the murmuration of birds flying by, right? There's a sense of openness and relaxation that happens. And when you're in that mode, your eyes are actually relaxed, right? So the thing about this practice is that you don't have to wait for the body to relax in order for your eyes to relax. It can actually be the opposite. So you can simulate relaxation by relaxing the eyes. Okay, let's try it. So find somewhere in the room where you're at, or maybe you're outside, just find something to look at and really focus on it. So we're going to try foveal vision first. This is focused vision. Just leave your eyes there and then really notice the colors, the textures. This is foveal vision. This is focused vision. And then see if you can, without moving your eyes, relax the eyes so you can see a little bit above, below, to the right, and to the left of this thing that you're focusing on. And as you do so, breathe in and out through the nose and make your exhales really long. And now see if you can relax the eyes even more, seeing a little bit more zoomed out without moving them again. See how much more of the room or the space you can see without moving the eyes, relaxing them even more. And then see if you can sense the space and see the space in your peripheral vision to your right and to your left. And even the space behind you, see if you can sense it. Almost as if you had eyes behind your head. So for me, as I do that, my shoulders relax a little bit, I sink a little bit. My voice might have even changed, right? My voice got maybe a little bit lower as I was speaking. I can feel that my heart rate is lower. So this is not going to solve your burnout, right? And any individual practice done once is not going to solve burnout. However, we do need to complete the stress cycle. And so if you are already feeling that burnout and you're in the midst of it, then I suggest doing all that you can to complete the stress cycle. And if you need support, please seek it out. Please seek it out. Don't navigate burnout on your own. It's really difficult to. And especially if you are in a transition, if you're planning to leave, right? Know that leaving well means creating transitions that are not forced by burnout, right? Leaving well means shaping your transition with care. And if you do want support for your team, for your burnout, or for a transition, or for both, if burnout is happening during or after, or even before your transition, please apply to work with me. You can work with me privately. We can work one-on-one. I just started working with someone one-on-one today. You can book a consult for team coaching, and maybe we'll do an episode in the future about what's the difference between individual coaching and team coaching, or what's the difference between team coaching and facilitation. But regardless, when you and I talk, we're going to come up with a plan and a proposal for how to move forward together, what is best for your team, whether it's a retreat or a workshop or some group coaching sessions or individual group coaching sessions. So yeah, I really want you to leave well. I do not want you to leave because burnout is forcing your hand, right? I do not want that for you. I don't want you to be burnt out, and I don't want you to have to leave your work in a position that you don't want to. So thank you for listening. If you are interested in working together, you will find the link in the show notes. Please share this. I also invite you to reach out and share your own experience of burnout and transition. And let me know what you think about this episode. All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps. And so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.